So it's been a while since I uploaded a video. But you know, life happens. Priorities change, and sometimes you end up taking a path you never expected. For me, this year started with me joining the BookTok community and became part of that. But somewhere along the way, I also stepped into the world of writing as a new author. And I'm currently working on my debut novel. As I've spent more time reading, following discussions and certain trends, especially on BookTok, and also analyzing stories from a writer's perspective, so to speak. There is one specific topic, or more genre, that keep coming up over and over again. And that is dark romance. And that is what I want to discuss a little bit about today. But before we begin, I just want to make one thing very clear. I just want to be clear saying that this video is not about attacking people who enjoy reading dark romance, because I know that genre has a huge audience. And everyone is free to read whatever they enjoy. What I want to discuss is something different. I want to talk about the patterns these stories keep returning to, the relationship dynamics they reward, and the emotional needs they seem to speak to. A couple of months ago, I wrote an article on Substack, which is called "You Don't Want Love, You Want to Be Chosen." And today's video is based on that article. I know this is a very, very sensitive topic, and I know many people will disagree with me, and that's completely fine. My goal is not to tell anyone what they're allowed to read or not. My goal is to ask a question that I think is far more interesting and far more important than whether dark romance in this case is simply good or bad. For example, what are these stories actually teaching us to recognize as love? Let's begin. There is a growing tension around the popularity of dark romance. And most discussions tend to get stuck in the wrong place. The debate often becomes moral, whether people should read it or not, instead of analytical. But the real issue here is not the darkness itself. It's what the darkness is being framed as. Dark romance frequently presents relationships built on control, obsession, fear, and power imbalance, and then reframe those elements as passion, desire, or even love. And that is where the problem begins for me. A recurring defense of the genre is simple: it's just fantasy. And that's true, but incomplete. Because fiction is not neutral. Stories teach through structure. They assign meaning through what they reward, what they ignore, and what they romanticize. So, if we want to understand why these stories resonate with some readers, I think we need to shift the question. Not to why do people enjoy dark romance, but maybe what emotional need is this fulfilling? A compelling explanation comes from a psychological perspective. Many people are not necessarily seeking love. They are seeking validation. They want to be chosen, not just liked. They want to be selected above all others. They want to feel seen, desired, deemed worthy. And when that validation comes from someone emotionally unavailable, distant, difficult to win, so to speak, it feels even more powerful. Because it creates the illusion of proof, the illusion of value. If this person chooses me, I must be valuable, I must be special. And this is where dark romance aligns almost perfectly with that internal pattern. The male character in dark romance is often presented as controlling, obsessive, emotionally closed off, while the female character often is the exception, the one the male character ultimately chooses. I'm sorry, but I really need to say this. this is not love, it is a reward structure. The narrative repeatedly reinforces a specific equation here. To be chosen equals to be safe. To be desired equals to be valuable. To be pursued equals to be worthy. But this equation does not originate from romance. It often originates much, much earlier. We see it originate in environments where love had to be earned, where emotional needs were overlooked, or where worth was tied to performance. So the reader is not responding to abuse as something desirable. They are responding to what it represents: validation, significance, emotional recognition, and so on. Just to be clear, the problem is not that these elements exist. The problem is how they are translated. A genre like dark romance often takes anxiety, fear, instability, and reframe them as chemistry, passion, and intensity. But friends, intensity is not love. Control is not care. An obsession is not devotion. And when these distinctions are consistently blurred, something subtle happens. Not to everyone, but for some. The boundaries begin to shift. For example, what should feel like a warning signal is rewritten as attraction. And I think this is where the genre itself becomes worth examining, not condemning, but questioning. Because it is entirely possible, of course, to write intense attraction, emotional depth, complex power dynamics without romanticizing harm or removing consequences. So the question is no longer, is dark romance allowed to exist? It is, why are destructive dynamics so often framed as love? And what does that say about the emotional patterns being reflected back to the reader? And I think, at its core, this is not about fiction. It's about recognition. Because real love, my friends, does not need to be earned through suffering. It does not require performance. It does not demand you to prove yourself. It does not demand you to prove your worth. Real love is not chaotic. Real love is steady. It is quiet. And for someone conditioned to chase validation, that can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable truth of all. Some people are not drawn to darkness because they want pain, but because they have learned to associate love with earning it. And that is not romance. That is a pattern. With that said, it's time to wrap up this video for today. Thank you so much for joining me today, and let me know your thoughts about this in the comments. Subscribe or whatever, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.